Hello, everyone. I'm Tanya Rivero. Thank you for joining us. The presidential candidates are back on the campaign trail after last night's debate, which is being described as chaotic, tumultuous, even downright embarrassing. Here's what Biden had to say while on a train tour today through Ohio and Pennsylvania when asked about undecided voters who watched last night.
I kind of thought at one point, maybe I shouldn't say this, but the President of the United States conducting himself the way he did, I think was just a national embarrassment. But look, I just hope that the American people and those undecided voters try to determine what each of us has as an answer for their concerns and allows us to actually speak.
President Trump and Joe Biden exchanged attacks last night, and here's what happened when Biden was asked if he would support packing the Supreme Court.
You should go out and vote. You're in voting now. Vote and let your senators know how strongly you feel. Vote now.
Are you going to pack the court?
Make sure you, in fact, let people know you're a senator. I'm not going to answer the question.
Why would you answer that
because
question?
the question is, the question is,
Justice, radical left.
Will you shut up, man?
Listen, who is on your list, Joe? Who's on your list?
Right, gentlemen, I think
this is so unprecedented.
A CBS News poll among debate watchers found 69% say the debate made them feel annoyed. CBS News' Natalie Brand reports.
The first presidential debate was marked by chaos, personal insults, and interruptions, more than 70 of them.
Everybody knows he's a liar.
But
I just want to make sure.
Joe, you're the liar.
The two candidates sparred over health care.
He wants to get rid of the Affordable Care Act.
What is the Trump health care plan?
Right. Well, first of all, I guess I'm debating you, not him. I'm cutting drug prices.
They also clashed over the economy and the coronavirus.
People want their schools open. They don't want to be shut down.
You can't fix the economy until you fix the COVID crisis.
President Trump denied a New York Times report that he paid only $750 in federal income taxes in 2016 and 2017.
I paid millions of dollars in taxes, millions of dollars of income tax.
Show us your tax returns.
I went. You'll see it as soon as it's finished. You'll see it.
One of the most striking moments of the debate was President Trump's response when asked if he would condemn white supremacy groups.
Who would you like me to condemn?
White supremacists and
Proud Boys, stand back and stand by. But I'll tell you what. Somebody's got to do something about Antifa and the left.
Members of the far-right self-described Western chauvinist group were listening. They quickly added Mr. Trump's words to their logo.
He is refusing to condemn white supremacy. Why is that so hard for the President of the United States?
Well, I think he has. I mean, I've been in press conferences when he has. I mean, I've seen him say it repeatedly. So, he's condemned many white supremacist groups.
President Trump returns to the campaign trail tonight with a rally in Minnesota. Democratic nominee Joe Biden has begun a train tour of Ohio and Pennsylvania, two critical battleground states. Natalie Brand, CBS News, the White House.
Ed O'Keefe is our CBS News political correspondent, and he joins me now. Hi, Ed. So the Commission on Presidential Debates put out a statement saying, quote, last night's debate made clear additional structure should be added to the format of the remaining debates to ensure a more orderly discussion of the issues. Are you hearing what sort of changes may happen? I've heard people suggest there should be a mute button after 2 minutes, or, like your third grade teacher used to do when the kids were misbehaving, just turn off the lights until everybody's quiet.
I don't think it's going to get that elementary, Tanya, but there is no debate that the Commission on Debates needs to make some changes to the next debate. And they say that they're going to debate those changes and announce them later. So they've got until next Thursday for the vice presidential debate, should they feel the need to insert some rules changes there. Otherwise, the next debate between the president and Joe Biden is on October 15th in Miami. And it's one that actually will involve questions from everyday Americans, undecided voters. And so that format and that structure is already going to be different because there is a fourth component, in essence. There's the two candidates, the moderator, and the crowd that is asking questions. So there is the potential for the president and Biden to potentially comport themselves a little differently. We'll see. But the fact that this nonpartisan commission that has been in place since the 1988 presidential campaign cycle and has hosted every debate since then in coordination with the two campaigns and the television networks, today so quickly came out and said something like this is quite notable. This is one of those institutions that's sort of hesitant to change, is sort of seen as a sort of an institutional hallmark of American politics. For them to so quickly turn on a dime and admit that they've got to consider some kind of a change is telling. And then, of course, the question will be, do the Biden and Trump campaigns agree to those changes, or do they potentially withhold participation because of them?
Well, of course, if these debates are actually going to inform the American people on the candidates' positions, they have to actually be able to hear the candidates speak. Now, Ed, a CBS News poll of debate watchers found 69% came away feeling annoyed. Only 17% felt informed. So what do you take away from that? Is anyone going to tune in to the next two debates?
We'll see. I'm impressed that at least 17% found it informative. Early indications are that the overall ratings, when you take all the television ratings from last night, were actually down from 4 years ago somewhat significantly. Maybe that's because instead of watching it on conventional television, they're watching it on Cbsn or some other streaming platform. But it is also likely that many people just simply didn't bother tuning in, that they've been so disgusted and zoned out by this campaign that they don't feel the need. But the other reason, too, is, and we talk about this frequently here, only 6% of Americans haven't made up their mind. So if you're someone who's made up your mind, you probably found something else to do last night thinking, I have no reason to tune in.
Right. Good point. So the Biden campaign says it had its best online fundraising hour to date after last night. So I guess that could be counted as successful. They raised nearly $4 million between 10 and 11 p.m. Does this show then that people, or at least Biden supporters, were pleased with his performance?
It certainly would, although we have no way of comparing it yet to what the president might have raised, whether it was around the same or not nearly as close. 3.8 million in 1 hour is a very good take, because we believe around the time that Kamala Harris was chosen as Joe Biden's running mate, for example, that he was raising about $1 million an hour. So that would show you, at least in that condensed time frame, the intensity level, the willingness of people to give was that much higher. That's no surprise. We've seen this in the past where debate nights or other big moments are also a fundraising draw. There were several text messages and emails sent out to Democrats throughout the day and during and after the debate last night. So it's perhaps not that surprising. But another sign that going into these final 34 days, the Biden campaign is a well-oiled, well-financed machine and able to spend that money in all sorts of ways. The mere fact that we're here in rural eastern Ohio, a part of a state that CBS considers to be a battleground, and one that Biden probably wouldn't have necessarily spent time in, given that, it went Republican last time, that they sort of see this as a state they'd like to get, didn't think they could, but polling recently has now shown that it actually could be very well within reach. That's a sign that they believe they can take the time and spend the money to be here today, snake their way into western Pennsylvania, a key region of another key state next door that they'd like to take back.
Absolutely. I also want to bring in now CBS News political director Caitlin Conant. Welcome, Caitlin. So, over 1 million people have already voted in this election. How much do these debates really matter at the end of the day?
Well, hi, and first of all, thanks for dealing with my tech difficulties here at home. I apologize that I'm late, but I think that last night was the last best chance for President Trump to change the trajectory of this race. And he had a chance to speak to the American public and give his case to voters on why he deserves a second term. And so the stakes were high, and it was an opportunity for him to address any of the voters whose mind may not be totally made up at this point. Granted, there are not many, and I think we saw that in our polls, that people's views are locked in. But he does have to make ground with some of those key voters that he lost, that voted for him in 2016 and have since moved towards Joe Biden and the Democrats. And those include women, suburban voters, and independents. And many of them say that they are really not pleased with the president's tweets, what they describe as his chaotic leadership style. And so last night, the president brought that chaos to the debate stage, and he acted as a disruptor, trying to throw Joe Biden off his game, make him feel uncomfortable. And I think all of that led to the chaos that has actually turned many of those 2016 voters and those key demographics away from him. So in many ways, what was not said and what was not done is equally as important as what was said.
Yes, it does seem if he was targeting those key demographics, those suburbanites, those women, that he wasn't making a huge effort to speak to those people because, as you pointed out, we know that some of those tactics of the president's are not their favorite for that demographic. And we have seen the president in the past speak to those people in a little bit of a more presidential manner. So I was a little surprised to see him going for full bluster. What do you think will happen with the two more debates left? What about those undecided voters? Do you think they've seen enough based on last night, or are they still going to wait for two more debates before making up their minds?
Well, I know Ed spoke to this earlier, but I wasn't surprised to hear that a lot of people were annoyed by the debate last night because I guess we were all watching the same debate. And I think that when you have crosstalk and interruptions, and as a viewer, when it's just hard to even understand what the candidates are trying to say, it's very frustrating and very distracting. And then when you put on top of that the weight of all of the issues that voters and people in this country are going through right now, whether it's they've lost a job, they've lost a loved one, they are dealing with their kids not in school while working full time. There are tough issues that people want addressed and want leadership and want to know when and how are their lives going to get back to normal. And I think that a lot of people walked away from last night unsatisfied. And so we'll see if there's change in tactics in the next couple debates here.
So, Ed, you are in Ohio because Joe Biden is taking a train tour through that state. You are following the Biden campaign as well as through Pennsylvania today. So Ohio is definitely a toss-up state in this race. Talk about what winning that state could mean for each candidate.
Well, if Joe Biden wins Ohio, it probably lights out for the Trump campaign because, well, first of all, there's this great historical fact that no Republican president has won the White House, at least since like the 1870s, without the Buckeye State. So if Trump can't win Ohio, he's going to have to pull it off in other places right now. That right now suggests he just can't do it. He would have to win places like Arizona. He'd have to win Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Florida, and all of the surveys done by CBS and others suggest that that's a tall tale right now, or a tall hill to climb right now. So Biden would love to do it. Probably, if it happens, it would be icing on a cake that's already been baked at that point. And the way he would do it is by running up the numbers in the suburbs of the big three C's in this state, Cincinnati, Columbus, and Cleveland, where there is evidence that support for Biden is growing among independents, among Democrats, even among some Republicans. But the way that you can close that margin even more is by winning back parts of the state like this here in Alliance, Ohio. This is Congressman Tim Ryan's congressional district. He ran briefly for president. You may remember he was the guy that challenged Nancy Pelosi for the speakership after elections a few years ago, arguing that the Democratic Party was tilting too far to the left. Well, no surprise he's a Joe Biden supporter and has been since the primaries because he knows that a Joe Biden-style Democrat can win back eastern Ohio and conceivably put the Buckeye State back in the blue column for Democrats. So by just making the tour through here quickly today in this pandemic era when it's very difficult to be out and about, or at least the Biden campaign takes precautions while doing so, it's a signal, they hope, to this part of the state that Biden's listening and is eager for their support. This is a part of the state that the president's been to before. He enjoys broad support. There were several dozen Trump supporters outside this event today, where inside Biden only had a few invited guests and us reporters, a sign that on the ground here, the Trump campaign has an operation. But the Biden team, again, speaking to the fact that they have the resources, believes they can afford to spend some time here and hopefully win back some votes.
It'll be a tough and interesting race there in Ohio. All right, Caitlin Conan and Ed O'Keefe, thanks to both of you for joining us. President Trump is trying to distance himself from the Proud Boys, a far-right group that has engaged in violent acts and has often supported white supremacist ideas, after the president gave a clumsy response when asked to condemn white supremacy at yesterday's debate. Today, the president claimed he doesn't know who they are.
I don't know who the Proud Boys are. I mean, you'll have to give me a definition because I really don't know who they are. I can only say they have to stand down, let law enforcement do their work. Law enforcement will do the work more and more as people see how bad this radical liberal Democrat movement is and how weak. The law enforcement's going to come back stronger and stronger. But again, I don't know who Proud Boys are, but whoever they are, they have to stand down, let law enforcement do their work.
The president told the Proud Boys to stand down and stand by at last night's debate. Some members of the group praised the comment online as supporting their movement. Mr. Trump has previously refused to directly condemn white supremacist groups when challenged on the topic. A federal judge says the Census Bureau is violating her order to continue the nationwide population count through October 31st. The Bureau is led by Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross. He says the census will stop its count on October 5th to meet an arbitrary December 31st deadline. The constitutionally mandated count is necessary to allocate federal funds and House seats. A lawsuit led by the National Urban League accuses the Trump administration of trying to cut the count short, saying it could lead to an undercount of communities of color. Former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn's defense attorney says she asked President Trump not to pardon her client. The disclosure came at a hearing to discuss whether the Justice Department had political motives in abandoning the case against him. Critics accuse Attorney General William Barr of giving special treatment to Flynn, who is a close ally of the president. Flynn's lawyer also told the D.C. District Court she has recently briefed the president on the status of Flynn's criminal case. In California's Wine County, the massive glass fire has tens of thousands of people under evacuation orders. Dry conditions and high winds continue to make it difficult for firefighters to contain the threat, and now thousands are forced to flee and are left with no timetable for when they can return home. Rachel Wolf from our CBS station in Stockton, California, has more.
How is your house?
I don't know.
For evacuees sleeping in their cars, the hardest part is not knowing what the future holds.
It's difficult for me because I'm pregnant.
This woman was staying in the parking lot at Crosswalk Community Church in Napa, one of 70,000 people told to leave Napa and Sonoma counties because of the glass fire.
We heard the sirens go off, and that's when we knew we had to leave.
Jetsiri Rivas left at 4 Monday morning with her entire family. After staying at the church, she was directed to Napa Valley Community College.
Oh, they're giving them out right now.
The emergency shelter is handing out toiletries, sanitizer, and masks, and beds are 6 feet apart to prevent against the spread of COVID-19.
And to add to accommodations for evacuees who can't stay inside, there are these hand washing stations and also outdoor bathrooms.
Both shelters housing more than 600 people and their animals. The Mungia family is thankful for the help.
We are trying to get a hotel for each family. We're still waiting for it.
A wait and watch game as the glass fire rages.
Are you scared? ¿Tiene miedo?
Un poco.
Yeah?
Un poco.
This man says he's a little scared, but like many, appreciates the help.
We have everything here. It's good. It's like a home.
Like a home, but no place like their home for those who are hurting.
We hope nothing bad is happening to my house because, oh my God, we don't want to lose it.
As the number of coronavirus cases continues to rise, doctors are learning more about how the virus impacts different body systems in recovered patients. Over 206,000 people have died from COVID-19. At least 7 million Americans have been infected. Meanwhile, many patients who have recovered are now reporting other lasting effects, including hair loss. Michael George reports.
Colleen Gaffney spent 2 days in the hospital in March, fighting COVID-19 and pneumonia. Recovering over the summer, she noticed her hair was falling out in clumps.
When I would brush my hair after the shower, the brush would just be full of hair.
By September, she'd lost about 50% of her hair.
All through the front, I can feel it, and the actual thickness of my braids were much thinner overall.
At the Cleveland Clinic, dermatologist Shilpi Caterpal has been seeing 20 to 25 patients a month with significant hair loss.
This phenomenon of hair loss is called telogen effluvium, and all it means is that a large portion of the hair that's normally in the growing phase gets shifted to the shedding phase as a result of some major shock.
The problem isn't unique to COVID. It can be triggered by any shock to the system, physical or psychological, and generally begins 2 to 3 months after the trauma. In the midst of the pandemic, COVID is the major trigger.
People are seeing hair everywhere, like in their combs, on their pillows, on their clothes, on the floor. The hair is just everywhere.
Dr. Caterpal says the shedding should end within 6 months, and the hair will start to regrow. She suggests managing stress through yoga and meditation to help speed the process, or using over-the-counter minoxidil. Gaffney also takes vitamin supplements and uses platelet-rich plasma injections to stimulate hair follicles.
I got through COVID. I'm feeling great, and now this. It's a little extra reminder of what I went through.
If hair loss is the only lingering symptom of the coronavirus, she feels fortunate, knowing it could have been even worse. Michael George, CBS News.
The duty to intervene. Coming up after the break, Buffalo is one step closer to passing a historic law protecting police who step in to prevent other officers from using excessive force. And Say Her Name, a nationwide strike for Breonna Taylor, aims to show the impact black women play in the American economy. You're streaming Cbsn, always on. In Philadelphia, police have arrested and charged a man for the murder of a black transgender woman, Mia Green. Officers stopped the man's car earlier this week after he ran through a stop sign. Police then reportedly found the 29-year-old victim with a gunshot wound to her neck in the front seat. Law enforcement and city officials have not yet released the details of the ongoing investigation. The Human Rights Campaign says 28 transgender Americans have been killed this year, nearly all of them black women. Last year, at least 26 transgender people were killed nationwide. The city of Buffalo is one step closer to reforming its police department. The city council approved an ordinance requiring Buffalo officers to intervene when another officer is using excessive force. It also holds officers who don't step in to help accountable, as well as protects officers who do help from retaliation. The ordinance now heads to the mayor, who could either sign it or veto it. The measure is named after Carryall Holloman Horn, who was fired from the force 12 years ago after she stopped a fellow officer from using a chokehold on a handcuffed suspect. Demonstrations for Breonna Taylor are happening in cities across the country. In Louisville, police have arrested over 100 protesters since a grand jury's decision to not press homicide charges against any of the 3 officers involved in her death. In New York City, black women are participating in a strike called A Day Without Black Women. Christina Fan from our New York City station has the story.
They've been chanting her name for months all across the country. But despite massive protests and repeated calls, no one has been held accountable for Breonna Taylor's death.
I felt anger. I felt sadness.
Demonstrators Tuesday in Zuccotti Park say the lack of justice is the long-standing reality of being a black woman in America. It's why instead of protesting, they are striking to show the economic power and influence black women possess.
We do so much in our community, so much in New York City, and we want people to be able to see how it is without us for one day, how we are needed. We want justice for black women!
The nationwide strike, called A Day Without Black Women, encouraged participants not to spend money and not to go to work. Those who couldn't physically strike were encouraged to wear Breonna's favorite color, purple, or to use a custom Zoom background for meetings.
It is time that this country starts to respect our bodies and our lives. We cannot accept a black woman being murdered in her home.
Breonna worked as an emergency room technician during the height of the COVID-19 pandemic. Organizers say they want the world to know that she was essential and that they are all essential.
We're trying to show folks what it looks like when black women are not of service to them. We're trying to show folks what it looks like economically when you strike.
Sending a message that their collective solidarity can bring this nation to a halt. In Lower Manhattan, Christina Fan, CBS 2 News.
JP Morgan Chase will pay nearly $1 billion in order to settle 3 federal investigations into the company's role in manipulating the global market for metal futures and treasury. The Commodity Futures and Trading Commission says the country's largest bank is slated to pay more than $920 million in penalties. Over the past 8 years, JP Morgan Chase conducted hundreds of thousands of spoof trades in an effort to fool investors. The company purchased and then canceled the orders in an effort to drive up a false demand for the asset. JP Morgan says the traders involved no longer work for the company. Negotiations between General Motors and the Nikola Motor Company are temporarily on pause. They stalled because of allegations of fraud and sexual abuse which surfaced against Nikola's founder and former executive chairman, Trevor Milton. The $2 billion deal would give GM an 11% stake in Nikola Motors in exchange for supplying the startup with battery and fuel cell technology to its vehicles. The first trial in Germany linked to Volkswagen's role in the emissions cheating scandal is underway. Prosecutors began presenting evidence today against the former CEO of Audi, Rupert Stadler. He's facing charges of fraud and false advertising. Investigators say he was aware Audi continued to sell diesel cars with software illegally programmed to meet air quality standards, even after the U.S. uncovered the cheating back in 2015. The trial is expected to last until at least 2022. A French fighter jet broke the sound barrier earlier today, creating a sonic boom that reverberated throughout Paris. It even interrupted a tennis match at the French Open. French officials say the pilot was told to break the sound barrier in an effort to get to an airline that lost contact with air traffic control. Officials say moments after the sonic boom, the airline's communication was restored. They're now looking into why it lost contact. We're going to take a quick break now, but we've got a lot more news ahead, so stay with us. You're streaming Cbsn, CBS News, always on. A Kentucky Circuit Court is granting the state's Attorney General until Friday to release grand jury material in the case of Breonna Taylor. That is according to an attorney for the officer charged with wanton endangerment in the case. Republican Daniel Cameron requested a week-long delay on Tuesday, the day he was supposed to release the material by 12 p.m. Eastern. Cameron says he needs time to redact names in the 20-hour recording and transcript. A member of the grand jury is asking for the full proceedings to be released to the public. None of the 3 police officers involved in shooting the 26-year-old this March were directly charged in her death. When asked about releasing the grand jury report last week, the Attorney General expressed reservations.
Right now, because there is a pending indictment, I think it is our practice, and because there is an ongoing FBI investigation, to revisit that question, but at this point I don't think it's appropriate for us to release any information.
Cameron also said last week it would be inappropriate to release the demographic makeup of the grand jury for the jurors' protection. The presidential candidates are back on the campaign trail today after a chaotic debate in Cleveland last night. President Trump will hold a campaign rally in Duluth, Minnesota tonight, while Democratic nominee Joe Biden is taking a train tour of eastern Ohio and western Pennsylvania today. Here's what Biden had to say about the debate.
What I saw last night was all about him. He didn't speak to you or your concerns or the American people even once. Donald Trump broke his promise. He said he was running to help the forgotten American. As soon as he got elected, he forgot them. I'll never forget. You know, I understand what you do. Wall Street did not build this country. CEOs did not build this country. Hard-working, average American people given half a chance built this country.
A CBS News poll shows a majority of viewers say the debate annoyed them. Only 17% say the debate made them feel informed. CBS News political correspondent Ed O'Keefe recaps the night.
How you doing, man?
It took less than 10 minutes for the highly anticipated debate to turn ugly.
Donald, would you
And
just
you don't
be
know-
quiet for-
And it stayed chaotic throughout the night.
The question is, the question is, Justice, radical left.
Will you
Who
shut
is
up,
on,
man?
listen, who is on your list, Joe?
President Trump tangled not only with Joe Biden, but also with moderator Chris Wallace, who pressed him to denounce white supremacy groups.
Well, who would you like me to condemn?
White supremacists and right
Proud Boys, stand back and stand by. But I'll tell you what, somebody's got to do something about Antifa and the left.
Members of the misogynistic far-right group that promotes violence clearly were listening. They quickly added Mr. Trump's words to their logo. Candidates swapped insults all night.
You're the worst president America has ever had.
Hey,
Come
Joe,
on.
let me just tell you, Joe, I've done more in 47 months. I've done more than you've done in 47 years, Joe.
The president repeatedly referenced Hunter Biden, whose work in China and Ukraine during the years his father served as vice president has drawn scrutiny from Republicans.